Hey Space Cats! If you're one of those lovely people who gets in touch with me from time to time asking what it is that I use in my artwork for picture books, for children's books and for my general illustrations, I'm here to tell you step by step exactly what I use so that you can use it too. There is no dark ulterior motive. I have no sponsorship for any of these things that I use. It's just genuinely what I like to use and what I find myself coming back to time and time again. So you might find this helpful if you're beginning your art journey, or you might be really into something else, in which case pop it in the comments, because I'm always looking out for new stationery to try and new medium to get my hands on. Right, let's get started. I'm going to start with the watercolour paper that I use on a regular basis. So this is the Daler Rowney Aquafine Smooth. That's really important because watercolour paper comes in 3 different varieties usually. There's rough, hot pressed and smooth. I like to use the smooth because it's, well, smooth. The rough is, well, guess what? Rough. So there's more dimples and divots in that paper. And this also comes in different weights. So this weight is £140 or 300 grams per square metre. This is just an A4 pad, and inside here's some of the pictures for shorts you might have seen recently. Paper does actually have a right side and a wrong side, so when you tear a sheet out, make sure you mark it in the corner with just a little dot or a tick or something that will show you which side is the right side. This is fairly thick. It feels like a sort of very thick piece of cartridge paper, but it does take the watercolour really well. It will buckle a little bit, but if you try my trick of spraying the back, then you should be fine with that. So yes, I'd recommend using this one, and that's what I use all of the time for all of my books and pictures. Next, what is in the pencil case? First, I'm going to talk about the brush pens, the Tombow Fudenosuke brush pens. The blue one is the hard-tipped pen, and that's the one that I use for most of my drawing. The black one is the soft tip, and that's much more like having a brush to work with. So let's try out the hard one. Depending on how hard you press, it's the thickness of line that you get. You can also do lettering. A lot of people do lettering with this because as you press down and then release that pressure, you can get quite a nice calligraphic sort of lettering. The soft tip is very similar, but just is a little bit more sort of messy in some ways, and you have a lot more freedom with pressing down harder, so the line does come out a lot thicker. You can still use it for calligraphy, which a lot of people do. And then talking of pens to use, it's really important to get a pen that you're comfortable writing with as well as drawing with, and these are great. This one's started to run out a little bit. So a brand new one looks like this. In some ways it's quite nice to get the pen used to your pressure. But I always use this as my signing pen because I think it makes for really nice writing. But of course you can draw with it as well. Let's check out what the face looks like. The only thing I would say about these Papermate ones is these are not waterproof, whereas the Tombow Fudenosuke ones, once they're dried properly, they are completely waterproof. But this is a really nice pen to use. If you want to use it with watercolour, what you could do is the watercolour first and then draw your lines afterwards. Then to pencils. So these two pencils, I've got a mechanical one and I've got a range of Staedtler Lumograph in different weights. So this is an 8B. I really like the Staedtler Lumograph ones. The 8B is lovely and soft, and it's great for doing layouts or just some rough sketches. If you want to use something that's you can make a bit more detail with, then the Mars Micro 0.5 is great because you get a very, very thin line, and it's quite a different colour. That graphite is a much paler grey, so you can use that for doing lighter work that you might want to then rub out afterwards. You can just, if you're tracing through or something, you can just do a really light line and then it's easy to rub out. Talking of rubbing out, I've got a normal Staedtler eraser, but I've also got this Mono Zero Tombow one, which is a mechanical eraser, and the reason I like using this one is because you can get quite a good detail. So if you wanted to rub just one little piece out, you can do that. Say if I want to rub one piece of this line out, I can do that without too much problem. Whereas if I was using a traditional eraser, it would be difficult to get such a fine detail. And then on to what paint I use. So this one is a pan of watercolour paints, and when I was at university I actually won a competition, and I won this as part of the competition, and it was quite a lot of money back in those days. In about 92 I think it was about £100. So all of these are artist quality pans of pigment. It's Winsor & Newton, Windsor with no D, and you can find them online, but I also use tubes. I've got a variety of different makes. I've got Winsor & Newton, the Cotman one, and I think Cotman is what they call the sort of regular quality, or the student quality. I've got some Daler-Rowney Aqua Fine, which again is that sort of regular person's usage one, but I quite like the colours of those. I've got some really terrible, goodness only knows what, titanium white watercolour, and I really need to replace that, so don't buy that one. And I've also got, when I can afford it and when I know I'm going to use a lot of it, I buy the artist quality. And if you're going to be doing a lot of painting, I highly recommend you buy artist quality paint. This is Daler-Rowney Artists Watercolour. I've got Prussian Blue, I've got French Ultramarine, Hooker's Green, and a variety of other ones that I inherited from my dad. So quite a lot of those, he always used to use the artist quality ones, because it's particularly if you're using the pans like this, when they produce these, as I understand it, sometimes they'll pack them with other stuff like glue to kind of pad it out a bit. So what you can do is, if you can't see it on the outside wrapper, you can press it, and if it's rock hard, that means it's probably the student quality one, and it's fine to use it. It's not like a child's paint, but if you want really good pigment, you need it to give a little bit as you press it, and you can feel the difference between that one's I can feel that one is definitely squidging in a little bit more, and I'm not getting anything off on my finger. So that one I would say is definitely artist quality, I think that one is probably not the ochre. And then thinking about brushes, these are a few of my ones. I usually use, for most, I would say 95%, I use tapered brushes. So that means they come to a point at the end. This one is useful for doing lots of water, and then the smaller brushes I use rarely, I would say. And this one, which is a rounded brush at the end, but it's also quite narrow. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I used this. So the ones that I'll show you the difference between them. So this is just plain water, and you can use it on its side like this. Let's see what it looks like with the colour on it. So you can get a nice broad line with that, but you can also, if you use the tip, you can also get quite a narrow line. And I'm holding my brush really far down here. Let's see what the really wide one looks like. And this is one that I would use if I was wetting, so I wanted to do wet in wet, I'd probably use this to wet the area down first. And then if you really wanted to do some small detail or dots or something like that, you'd use this. You can pick up quite a lot of that pigment, saturated pigment. But you can't do a really large area. You might want to use it by going back into something that's already wet and perhaps adding a bit of colour to the edges before it gets completely dry. And then finally, the one that I hardly ever use, let's see what that's good for. I have used it for doing things like fences. If I'm drawing a fence, I might want to do some really thin lines like this. But otherwise you can get quite a thick line if you use it flat on, or if you use it side on, quite a thin line. These are the rest of the brushes that I have. They're nothing special. They were from the range in the UK, which the whole set was about £10, I think. But I do have some decent brushes that I've had for a long time. I inherited a lot from Dad as well. This one is a Daler Rowney, and this, which is my favourite brush, I've had for donkey's years, and it says it's a Pro Art one, but it's so old that the label has disappeared, so I'm not really sure what that said. Something by Pro Art in the UK, and it's a size 16, I think, but that's my favourite brush. And I also have some of these graduate Daler Rowney ones. And then really the last thing to show you is my box of tricks. And if you and I have hung out before and you've seen me draw anything, you've almost certainly seen me using these chaps. They are Derwent Inktense pencils, and I absolutely love them. I started off my collection by just buying them singly, and they were about £4 a pencil, but somebody, a lovely friend of mine, actually gifted this to me because she was given a couple of boxes, and she gave one box to me, which was unbelievably generous. So thanks Zoe again. I made myself a little colour chart to show what each one looked like once you add water to it, so it's a really easy way of just checking what colours I need to use. But this little chap comes with a surprise drawer. Of more pencils. These ones are watercolour pencils but not Inktense, so I think that just really means that they are a bit less saturated in their pigment, and it comes with also some little pencil holders and and one of those pencils where you can smudge a little bit. And then this was some sort of celebratory kit, because lo and behold, behind here we have a very strange picture of Kate and William, our future king and queen, which is absolutely horrible. I think that does not particularly do Kate any justice whatsoever. So sorry, person who made this, but that's staying firmly in there. But again, you get some other little bits and pieces, some sponges and a little palette. Lastly, up here on the shelf above where I'm doing my painting, I've got a spray bottle with just water in it, loads of kitchen paper, and in there there's some inks. So for when I do dip pen work, which I don't think I've got my dip pen here at the moment, but sometimes when I use dip pen I need a bottle of ink as well. So I've got various different coloured inks there, all that are waterproof. So once they've dried, they're not going to go anywhere when I add the watercolour. Feeling quite artistically motivated, I am going to come back to the studio next week and draw something or paint something that really inspires me. So if you want to get on an inspirational journey, come and join me. Until then, I'm off to snap at a snapdragon. I will see you next week. Nano. Oh, I think I stopped breathing.